Recording by Phil Shinover. Of a book of nonsense. There was an old man who supposed that the street door was partially closed, but some very large rats ate his coats and his hats, while that futile old gentleman dozed. There was an old man of the West who wore a pale plum-colored vest. When they said, "Does it fit?" he replied, "Not a bit." That uneasy old man of the West. There was a young lady of Sweden who went by the slow train to Weedon. When they cried, "Weedon Station," she made no observation, but thought she should go back to Sweden. There was an old man of Marseilles whose daughters wore bottle green veils. They caught several fish, which they put in a dish and sent to their pa at Marseilles. There was an old man of Wrekin whose shoes made a horrible creaking, but they said, "Tell us whether your shoes are of leather, or of what, you old man of Wrekin?" There was a young lady whose nose was so long that it reached to her toes. So she hired an old leddy whose conduct was steady to carry that wonderful nose. There was an old person of Burton whose answers were rather uncertain. When they said, "How d'ye do?" he replied, "Who are you?" That distressing old person of Burton. There was a young lady of Norway who casually sat in a doorway. When the door squeezed her flat, she exclaimed, "What of that?" This courageous young lady of Norway. There was an old man of Apulia whose conduct was very peculiar. He fed 20 sons upon nothing but buns, that whimsical man of Apulia. There was a young girl of Majorca whose aunt was a very fast walker. She walked 70 miles and leaped 15 stiles, which astonished that girl of Majorca. There was a young lady of Butte who played on a silver gilt flute. She played several jigs to her uncle's white pigs, that amusing young lady of Butte. There was an old lady of Prague whose language was horribly vague. When they said, "Are these caps?" she answered, "Perhaps," that auricular lady of Prague. There was an old person of Filey whose conduct was scroobious and wily. He rushed up a palm when the weather was calm, and observed all the ruins of Filey. There was an old man on whose nose most birds of the air could repose, but they all flew away at the closing of day, which relieved that old man and his nose. There was an old man of the North who fell into a basin of broth, but a laudable cook fished him out with a hook, which saved that old man of the North. There was an old person of mold who shrank from sensations of cold, so he purchased some muffs, some furs, and some fluffs, and wrapped himself well from the cold. There was a young lady of Dorking who bought a large bonnet for walking, but its color and size so bedazzled her eyes that she very soon went back to Dorking. There was an old man of Abruzzi, so blind that he couldn't his foot see. When they said, "That's your toe," he replied, "Is it so?" That doubtful old man of Abruzzi. There was an old man in a casement who held up his hands in amazement. When they said, "Sir, you'll fall," he replied, "Not at all." That incipient old man in a casement. There was an old man of Coblentz, the length of whose legs was immense. He went with one prance from Turkey to France, that surprising old man of Coblentz. There was an old man with a beard who said, "It is just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren, have all built their nest in my beard." There was an old man of Dundee who frequented the top of a tree. When disturbed by the crows, he abruptly arose and exclaimed, "I'll return to Dundee." There was a young lady of Ryde whose shoestrings were seldom untied. She purchased some clogs and some small spotty dogs, and frequently walked about Ryde. There was a young lady whose bonnet came untied when the birds sat upon it. But she said, "I don't care, all the birds in the air Are welcome to sit on my bonnet."